Right. I'm going to go a bit rogue with this one. Was Ollie United's best interim fix again over Carrick? In my opinion, the obvious answer is yes, and not because he's some elite level tactician, not because he's the long-term solution, but because interim management is a different job. Ollie's already proven he can create an immediate swing in morale, role clarity, and results without needing months of tactical installation. But here's the twist. If he's so obviously suited to this type of job, why do United keep refusing the sensible option and jumping from one next Guardiola, next Sir Alex fantasy archetype to another? Because the dopamine of a glamorous appointment feels like progress, even though when the outcome says the opposite. So the real question becomes, if United should be moving away from the genius manager myth and towards a strategy that prioritizes the effectiveness of the whole management team, would Ole have been the best short-term stabilizer precisely because he isn't trying to turn the squad into a tactical laboratory? To answer that, we need three things. Why interim management is its own specialized craft, what Ole actually showed last time that made him elite at the interim job, and what United should do during the interim period so we don't waste another season waiting for the summer. So for me, why interim management is a different job. It's not about building a perfect philosophy. It's about stopping the bleeding fast. It's about getting the team functional again quickly by solving three things in order. First, morale, because performance collapses when belief collapses. Second, role clarity, because players can't execute what they don't understand. And then third, game state discipline, because even a broken team that can steal points if it stops beating itself. And this is why most interims fail, because clubs treat interim appointments like summer appointments. They ask them to come in and install a new system mid-season when the squad is physically fractured, physically overloaded, tactically confused. So what does this what does an interim look like? Yeah, a successful one look like, actually, should I say. I look at Gus Hiddink at Chelsea. Chelsea didn't become a tactical invention. They became emotionally stable and structurally clear. That alone turned the season functional, and they won an FA Cup out of it. Look at the Jupp Heynckes era at Bayern. There was no theatre, there was no project, just competence, authority, and simplification. Mission achieved. And for me, that's the interim archetype that works. The stabilizer with leverage, not the revolutionary. And yes, sometimes an interim becomes permanent, like Hansi Flick. But Flick didn't win because he arrived with a manifesto. He won because he created, instant clarity, um, and got the squad playing free. And that's the real interim superpower. And this is why we saw Ranić fail when he came into United. We saw him come in, try and imprint his style of football into a bit of a Frankenstein squad. Just wasn't going to work. And he asked for January signings and didn't get them. So now the key question is, what would Ole have brought that matches this pattern, and why does it matter to United right now? So for me, the biggest misconception about Ole was, people labeled him as just vibes or pure counter attack, and I always thought that was lazy. Ole at his best was flexibility first. He prioritized player comfort, attacking freedom, and emotional momentum. And he did that over forcing everyone into a rigid tactical identity for the sake of aesthetics. Excuse me. Counter-attacking wasn't his full identity. It was a weapon against certain teams like City and PSG. And if you want proof this matters, look at that interim run in 2018-19. The change wasn't a new tactical textbook. The change was that players looked like they had permission again. Their tempo rises, risk-taking returns, attackers run harder. The entire team looks like it has oxygen, which isn't aesthetics, it's just psychology. And psychology is an interim manager's primary currency. Now, let's get specific because trust comes from specifics. Ollie's best interim skill is this: he gets to a functional baseline quickly by removing unnecessary constraints. He simplifies instructions, he uses a familiar structure, and he gives players flexible reference points in roles suited to their skill sets. In football manager language, I guess you could say it's less rigid duty map and more a front line where roles can blend, a 10 who can float, not be handcuffed, security first midfield, then creativity. And here's why this matters at United. United isn't a clean room environment. The Premier League is too fast, too physical, too adaptive for fragile systems to be installed mid-season. And it's why fantasy appointments are dangerous. A coach arrives with the aesthetic of genius, and then injuries happen, media pressure hits, results dip, and suddenly you need emotional management, adaptability, squad profiling, not just a concept board. Ollie isn't elite at micro tactical invention, but he is elite at maintaining morale, managing confidence, getting players to perform near their ceiling. And when your squad is confused and fragile, that's gold dust. So if Ollie was the stabilizer, what should United actually do? What should have they done with the interim period? Because if we use it like a waiting room, I think we've learnt nothing from the previous eras, or era, should I say. So the interim period should be treated as a data collection window, not just performance data, but like squad shaping data. Because the biggest advantage an interim can give you isn't only points, it's information. United keep arriving at summer windows blind. They don't know which young players can handle senior minutes, which seniors can function in multiple roles, what profiles are missing until they've wasted money on the wrong solutions. So here's the blueprint. One objective: re-establish a simple match model, simple enough to execute immediately, structured enough that you can actually evaluate the players fairly. Because if the team is tactically incoherent, you can't assess individuals properly, and then you get the sensationalism from 2022 with Gary Neville saying this football club needs a complete rebuild. It's a bad group of players, bad eggs. Everyone needs to go. You get Ranić saying it needs open heart surgery. Objective two: minutes with intention. Not charity minutes, intentional minutes, defined roles, defined game states, defined tests. Can you receive under pressure? Can you hold width? Can you protect the half space? Can you press on triggers without collapsing the block? This is how elite clubs make summer decisions with confidence. Objective three is recruitment alignment. If Ollie stabilizes, and if Ollie was to come in, and I know obviously Michael Carrick's been confirmed, but if Ollie did come in and stabilize and create a baseline, the club can identify the permanent coach based on fit, not fantasy. And the fan base, I think, needs to grow up here as well, because the next appointment shouldn't be about next gen vibes or charisma. It should be about the hardest recurring game state United face: low blocks, compact midfields, teams who refuse to press. That's where league seasons are won, and you can still big away wins with transition football, but you win titles by breaking down teams who want a zero. So the interim window should expose brutally what United can't do in settled possession, what patterns create chances, what patterns create turnovers, and which profiles consistently solve problems. So for me, United, if Ollie was United's best interim fix again, not because it's romantic, because it's logical. The real question isn't, is Ollie the long-term answer? Excuse me. The real question is, do United finally want to make a smart decision before summer forces them into another fantasy appointment? Because if you get the interim wrong, you don't just lose months, you lose the ability to learn, as we've seen prior. And that's what keeps repeating. So let me know what you thought. I know Michael Carrick's been already appointed, but what would Ollie have been better at stabilizing? Now, I don't think he would have done this on his own. I maintain that if you were going to bring him back, you'd have to bring in an elite level coaching staff with him. Or is it time to just stop looking backwards completely? Because I completely understand not going for Ollie, repeating a past mistake that was almost unavoidable. And if you're just going backwards, you're going in, you're going in cycles, and it just shows that and the board can't afford to get it wrong. And the last thing the board want to do is make similar decisions to what the previous regime did when they're trying to right the wrongs of the previous regime. So let me know, like, comment, subscribe, hype the video, please. And I'll see you next time.